Hello everyone and welcome back. So after the environment series that we did from start to finish, I thought about creating like a product rendering, also from covering all the steps. So I'm not sure what we will accomplish today, but we will start obviously with the modeling of the product. This is the progress I have so far. This is like a water bottle, premium water bottle, and yeah, we'll start with the modeling and see where we go from there. So let's get started. So yeah, let's start by creating a reference image where we will import our reference, which will be this image in here. And right away I'm going to transform it, so I'm gonna scale it to 3, change a bit of the alpha to something like this, and also press enter and move it up to something like this. So that's fine, that's our reference image. Now we can create a geometry and let's name it bottle. And this is the tedious part where we'll trace with a curve the bottle. So let's just start with a curve. And we will press enter or click on the icon. Let's make one of here of the center. Create another one in here. Then we can move with another one in here. Oops, this is snapping for some reason. And let's move it up. So now it's a bit too big, so we can press F and adjust in here. So let's make this smaller and continue from here. So let me make sure I set the primitives, press G, and now we can continue. So let's make one in here, another one in here, then we can start to move in and do in here the following points. Middle click, you can drag the points. Oops, and make sure we don't start a new point. Don't start a new curve, I mean. So let's go in here and do something like this. So we have a single primitive, that's fine. Now, if we start to resample this, we won't get that sharp transition. So let me show you that. As you can see, we will lose that even if you set it quite low, we will still have this transition. So what we can do in here, this is like a trick that we can do is to measure the curvature. I shared this before on the channel. So measure the curvature, the Gaussian, and we can create a group on the points and say that curvature bigger than 0.9, let's say. And make sure we set this to points. And we might need to change this a bit. So 0.99, let's see. Still targeting those points. So what we can do, we can make sure, oh, I have 2 points in there, so let me check that. So let me press F and delete this point. So let's make sure, yeah. And here we also have 2 points for some reason. So let me delete and also select in here a single point and delete. So now that should work. I still need to play a bit more with the curve tool. So as you can see, it's only targeting that point. Now we can polycut. And we can cut and cut at group 1. Now we will have 2 primitives. And finally, we can resample it. In this case, resample and with a length of about 0.05. So something like this. And as you can see, it will keep that sharp transition. And finally, we can just polypath to unite again the curves. So make sure we connect. So now it's working. So what else am I doing in here? I'm also going to, now let's revolve. So to create the shape. And we will have the bottle, and let's make sure we hide the background and create, make sure in here we reverse. So we will have these UVs, but I'm not a big fan of these UVs, so we will create new ones. But for now, let's just change the divisions in here to 32. So something like this. As you can see in here, it's all of a mess. So let's try to fuse this and increase. Maybe that won't work as well. So let's make sure we don't see this. Let's see. Yeah, we need to adjust that curve. So let's go in here. And in the curve, let's select that point, press F and K. And now we can snap to the grid. So, oops. So let's make sure we snap in here to the grid point. So drag it and snap it. Let's see how that looks right now. We still have that sharp transition. Let's make sure, yeah, we're selecting only that point. And we revolve, let's see. Now we should be able to fuse easily. So that point, yeah, that is fine. Let's get rid of this. We have the fuse, and now I want to get a group for the seams for to do the UVs. So for that, I'm going to create a group in here on the curve, and I'm gonna set it to edges and do a simple group transfer to the geometry. And we will only transfer the edge group, so group 2, and make it really low, so a threshold of 0.01. And now we already have a group for the seams, so that's fine. Now we will create a UV flatten. Let's make sure we don't create a manual layout. It will look like this, and we can input the group tool. But as you can see, it will also be a bit of a mess. Let's try to do this, but still doesn't work as well, because we need to create other groups also. So in this case, we will create another group. So group, we also need to break it in here and in here, otherwise it won't work properly. So let's make sure we create an edge group. And in this case, we can call it again group 2, and we will do union, include by edges, and min edge length. So we can probably increase this to something like this, and let's try that again. So now it's cutting on the bottom and in here. Let's try to rectify it to see, but as you can see, it's not great because it will rectify also this part, and I don't want that. So what we can do is to create, it's to orient properly the UV shell. So for that, I'm gonna create a group of vertices, so we can input in here axis aligned vertex groups. So we can create a group in here and another one in here to align properly these UVs. And I'm gonna create in here a vertex group. Now we need to select those, but I want it procedural. So I'm gonna create a spare input and connect in here the polypath, I believe. And now we can do the following. We can create by bounding regions, set a really low size, 0.01. And now in the center Y, we can do the following. We can create a point. We can read the point position of a point. So incoming -1, which is the spare input, and we want the position. And the point for now it's 0. And the component is the second one, so the y-axis. And now in here, we can play with the point. So let's go in here and select, let's say this one. As you can see, it's iterating over the points. We can create one in here and another one in here. Let's make sure we select this to group 5. And now we can go in the vertex alignment, create 2, and we will align group 4 and group 5. And now as you can see, it will be almost perfect. It's upside down, but we can fix that. And now I want to rectify only this shell. So for that, I'm gonna create a UV connectivity. Am I recording? Yes. I need to find a way to have this warning if I'm not recording. So primitive, and we will do UV connectivity, and this will create an ID for each shell so we can target them easily. And now we can do a UV flatten, but we don't want to destroy the incoming UVs, so we will do the following. We will do preserve seams and preserve layout, I believe, and we can target in here the specific group. So at class is equal, let's say 0. Yeah, is the 0. Now I don't know which one it is. Let me just check in here. In this case, I believe is 1. Yeah, it's 1. And we can just rectify that. So yeah, like this. So let me just check. It's something like that. And I would also, so right now is actually this turn it now is oriented properly, so we don't need to take an extra step to orient these UVs. But maybe we can move them to the center. So let's do that. Let's create a wrangle and move them to the center. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it in here, so it just goes over this shell. I'm gonna create a string called geo so I can unwrap it, and the incoming geometry and the UV. I'm gonna create a pivot. So get bounding box center with a primitive group, so 0, not 0, sorry, the geo unwrapped. And as we will also do at class equal to plus I2A channel string. So CHS, and I believe it's called group, so we can just target that. Let's see if that works. It doesn't. So is this called group? Yes. What is complaining about? String invalid source int. So let me see, what am I using in here? Oh, we don't need this I2A, sorry. We can just use plus. So okay, now we can remove this one also. That's fine. And now we will do vector at UV minus equals pivot, and that should move it in there. So let me see. Oh, we don't need this one in here. So we can just say this one. So at class equal to 1. That should work. Oh, sorry, we should do this on vertices, of course, because we are working with a vertex attribute. So we move that to the center, and we just use this because it already has the class in there. And now, in case we had our UVs inverted, which happened in my original file, we could just do v at uv times equals minus 1. And that would invert our UVs, but in this case we don't need. So now let's have a look at UVs. Now we can just move this shell to the center, and for that we will do v at uv plus equals. And it's important to set a vector attribute, because if we just set to 0.5, that would work and it would move it to the center, but at the same time, when we rasterize these in cops, the UVs will be all over the place on the z-axis. So just to make sure, we will do a vector in here and set it to 0.5, 0.5, and 0.0. So, oh, not 0.4. So x, y, and z, or UVW in this case. So that is fine. And now what else we will do? We will do a UV layout. Let me make sure I do something in here. We will do also preserve layout. Am I doing this properly? Oh, we also need to, we do preserve layout, but enable manual layout. So we have the scaled down version. So that's also important. We move it to the center. And now we can just UV layout these two shells. And for that, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and we can copy from here. So let's copy this and paste it in here and make sure we invert it. So we just lay out these two and we will do fixed and just make sure they don't overlap. So something like this. That is totally fine. We could also apply some padding, not spread, but apply some padding. So something like this will work fine. And now we will create a normal on the points, and let's move this into the geometry. And this will be create a null, and this will be our out base. Let's do the rest in the next part. So as you can see, the UVs are now inverted, so we need to fix that. That's pretty easy. We just come in here, v at uv multiplied by -1. That will work. So sorry about that. So we just inverted, and there's also something I wanted to do in here. Oh, I know. In this resample, we can do subdivision. So we get a more smoothed look. That's fine. And that should help us out. So now we have the base, and we want to create this triangulated look on the bottom. And for that, I'm going to use these placements. So let's start to work on that. So for that, I'm going to object merge in here, the base, and let's move these in here. And now we will clip this, clip, and we will clip along the Y. Let's see, we will set the distance in here. Let me see how much I used in here. So 0.05, and we will do another clip and say, let's say 0.9, but in this case we will do below the plane, and we have our base. Now we can do a polyfill, and this is just to generate the, let's do quadrilateral grid and not deform the patch. This is just to create the triangulated look. Now we will do a remesh to create the triangles. Let's do that. I'm always checking if I'm recording. Let's get rid of these UVs, and we will set, now you define the amount of triangles you want. I'm gonna set it like this, increase the iterations. I'm gonna blast the top and bottom parts. So for that I'm gonna group by normals along Y, reduce this, that's fine. Make sure we have both sides with this checkbox, and let's blast this. So blast group 6. That is fine. Let me see. In my original scene, I didn't have such jagged look. So maybe we can decrease the smoothing. Yes, that is it. Now, after this, we will create UVs for this. In this case, I don't think I need UVs, because I will just create a displacement from this, so we can skip that part. It would be interesting to cover, but in this case I don't need that. So we can just create in here an attribute to just float, and we want a mask along the Y. So let's create in here mask. Let's visualize it and make sure we are seeing it. Let's do bounding box along Y, and we will need to adjust in here. And now we will do an attribute randomize and move around the points. So we will randomize the position, and in this case, let's make sure we set this to -1, so 0 centered, -1 to 1. Let's we don't want to set, we want to add value, I believe. yeah, add value. And now we can set, let's say 035. Let's also place a normal. And let's remove the smoothing. Let's see how that looks. So now is also displacing on the top, and we can play with the seed in here and find a nice spot, but I want to remove this on the top. So there's no way we can introduce a mask in here, I believe. So let's just do blend shape. And let's blend this with this. And if we blend in here, we get back to the previous result. Yeah, so that is fine. And now we can just blending mask set from attribute. So mask. And in the mask, we can create, let me see, what have I done in here? A needle shape, yeah. So let's create a needle and invert it. So invert it. And now we can play with the fall off. So something along these lines and something like this. I guess this is fine. So that should be working. Let's see, we go from this to this. And let's, can I increase it a bit more or maybe play with the seed? So let's see, this is fine. And now we can just create a null. Let's call this out disp, maybe capital. And so now we have this base, the bottle base, and we have the displacement, and we want to bake this displacement geometry to our bottle. So let's do that next. So now we will create the displacement, and for that I'm not going to bake with the labs maps baker. I'm gonna create a copnet and make sure we import these. And in here, let's do a sub import external and paste it. So we have UVs, that's what we need. Let's duplicate this and out this. We also need this part. And they should align, so now we can create a wrangle. And let's get rid and create two. And let's name this bottle. And this one will be this input. And now we can change this to geometry and geometry. If we change it right away to geometry, it will be just called input 1, input 2, and I like to have them named. So I just change the index to 2. Now I'm gonna connect this. Let's see, let's create another wrangle, and I have in here a displacement setup that I'm going to copy instead of typing everything. I covered this before using the UVDs to rasterize attributes, then the prim UV, and we get the original position and the normals, and from there we just do two intersects. So we do a first intersect with the displacement, and we do a second one if we didn't find, just to make sure we cover all the directions. And then the displacement is just the length of the position minus the original position that we rasterized and multiplied by the sign input. So instead of me typing everything and spending like half an hour, I'm just going to paste this in here, make sure I change this to P because I'm not rasterizing setup. And let's see, now we also need to create in here, so RGB ORGB and mono disp. That's what I have. Let me see if that works. So it doesn't work because, let's see, we need to create in here the padding and the maximum distance. So padding, that should be fine, and maximum distance of the displacement. Let's see with how is it called, equalize. So let's see if the displacement is working, and it is. But as you can see, we will get this topology interfering in our displacement baking. So in order to fix that, we need to subdivide the mesh. I didn't find another workaround, So bear with me. We will do a subdivide, and we will subdivide it 3 times and creating here a null. And this won't be renderable geometry, it's just for the displacement baking. So out base subd, and let's copy this. Let's see if that problem goes away. If you find another solution, please let me know, but this was the only solution I found. So that seems to work better. I was also suggested to let's get rid of this. I was also suggested to bake the displacement from this original position of the cylinder to the displaced one, and that would work. But then when we transfer it to the bottle geometry, we will get all sorts of issues. So I'm not going to rely on that and just do this directly. So now we have our displacement. We can create a preview material. Let's see if this doesn't crash, because I've been having all sorts of issues with Houdini lately. So let's connect the displacement, and we don't need to do any adjustment of scale, hopefully. So let's just see, and yeah, it's working. We might need to scale this a bit down, so let me just change this color. Now it's complaining my graphics card, so we have the displacement, but we might need to scale it a bit in, so I'm gonna pin this and go in here and do a transform. Make sure we do it, let's see, let's place a transform and do 0.98, let's see. That should work better. So we go from this to this. Now it's a bit more in. I like the result, so that's fine. Now, sorry for not doing this step by step, but I covered so many times already these UVDs. You can also do XYZDs, that will be fine. And then you do the prim UV, and the displacement is just this formula. You subtract the original position from the position found in the intersect function, and you multiply it by the sign, either positive or negative. So we start with a positive sign, which we'll do for the first intersection, and in the second intersection, when we go backwards, where we do minus there, we will just do -1 for the sign. So hopefully that's clear. If you have questions, please leave them below. So now we will do some adjustments in here. We will need to create like a shape to blend with this displacement, because right now it's too harsh of a transition. So let's actually do that. We will start with let's see, SDF shape. Oops, and press R. We will change this to triangle, and let's say 0.36 and 1.75, something like this. And we will also translate it to 0.1. These are some values that I found that worked. Now we can blur this, and we will blur it quite a bit, so about 0.2. Now we'll create another one and change this to a rectangle. And in this case, I moved this down by 0.9, size 2 by 2, and the rest is fine. And now we will do an SDF blend. We will just union this. That should work. And now we will do another blur to mix in the shape. So let's do 0.35, so quite a bit. So we have this shape. Now we will do an SDF adjust. I believe it's just to dilate it a bit. Let's see. So let's see, 0.048. Yeah, just to dilate it a bit. And now we can do, we can rasterize it to mono. And we will do -0.07, just to get rid of that part over the top. We will also do a mirror, because I want this upside down. So in this case, I believe I used custom mirror, and we will do -90 and an offset of -1. So something like this. Now we will also do a transform, because we need to move this to the correct part. In this case, we can just get rid of this, or we can keep it in here and do layer properties, because right now it's styling and I don't want it. So I'm gonna set this to clamp. So let's see how it looks. Now it will just continue the shape instead of wrap. So I'm gonna do clamp, and I'm gonna also invert this, so complement, and we have something like this. So now we will need to transform it and blur it and multiply this with our current displacement. So multiply this with this. Let's see how that looks. So let's look at the z-axis. As you can see, it's on that part. So in this case, we need to translate it. Let's see if it works in here. So I'm gonna translate it to 0.37. And it looks to me like it's in the center. And let's blur this a little bit. So 0.0075. It's still too harsh. Did I blur it a bit more? Yeah, I also need to blur this one in here. So let's blur in here. So about 0.008. So the transition is not so harsh. And I'm also going to play again with the size. So 0.96. That is fine, and we need to play with this shape. So I'm just copying from my original file, but probably we need to play in here a bit more. So let's maybe do 0.2. No, we need more. And what can we do in here? So let's see this blur 0.15. So 0.1. And let's start to reduce this in here. So that is fine. And maybe we can blur it a bit more in here. No, that gets rid of our transition. So maybe we can adjust in here. Let's see if that is... let's remove this blur and reduce the height in here. And maybe play a bit more with the blur in here. Let's blur this a bit. And in this blur, we could probably increase this and just increase in here the size, so just to get a smoother transition. So something like this will work, and maybe play in here with the blur, so 0.4. So we get something like this. Now it's overlapping a little bit in here, so I'm going just to play with the seed. So something like this is fine. Maybe reduce the effect. So I guess something like this is fine. Maybe increase in here to 0.97. And yeah, that's basically it. Now in the next part we could probably do the cap and finish the modeling of this bottle. So guys, I already have 40 minutes of recording. I think I'm just going to do the cap, finish the modeling, and we will do the rendering part in the next video. So let's start with the cap. Let's create a tube. And why is this? So I need to get rid of this and disable this also. That's fine. Let's see. I'm gonna change the height to 0.4. And let's see, I increase also the columns to 16. Now we will do polyfill. So let's do that, polyfill. Let's do quadrilateral grid and on deform. Now we can select the bottom part and get rid of it. So group. Let's do by angle along Y and reduce it and do negative. That should work. Let's blast that part. There we go. Now I'm going to create in here a secondary shape. So let's go in here and do a clip and make sure we do it along the Y and do all primitives. So it just creates the plane, the cut, and let's do minus 0.155. So around that part, let's save those clip edges and let's do a bevel. And we will do a bevel on those clip edges and let's say something like this. And now we can save those polygons and what we'll do, we can do just the unwrap right now. So let's do cylinder, labs UV unwrap cylinder. And let's see if that works. That should work fine. Let's also make sure in here on the polyfill we offset this a bit, so something like this, so it is aligned properly. And now we will do a blast of those point fill polygons. No, of those, yeah, point fill polygons. Why is not working? Oh, I know why. It's not point, it's edge fill polygons. So let's get rid of this and blast the edge fill polygons. That's fine. Now we will do a small bevel on the top. So let's do a bevel. And let's make sure we exclude the flat edges. And let's maybe do 0.03, that's fine, and 3 divisions. Now let's also thicken this to create some geometry. And we will do both directions, and in this case, I use the value of 0.01. So we just thicken the geometry, and now let's do a small bevel. Not this one, this is from the modeler plugin. If you want me to cover some modeling tutorials using the modeler plugin, let me know. I try to avoid to use plugins because some people don't have it, and then it's a problem to do these sort of tutorials. So we just bevel those edges in there. Now, let me see what I have going on in here. We have UVs. Yeah, we need to create in here. So let's see our UVs. We need to create connectivity on the UVs. So after this polybevel, we will create a primitive UV connectivity and let's call it island. And now we will do a subdivide. No, we'll do a UV layout because right now they are overlapping due to the bevel. So let's just do a UV layout. Maybe we can apply some padding. That's fine. Now let's do a subdivide. Maybe twice. Let's see if we still have that attribute. So the island we do. And let's do a soften normals. And that's our cap. Now we just need to create a null in here and name it out cap. So after this, we can create a merge and create an object merge. And let's do this one. And now we will do a match size. So create a null. And we will do a min to max. And we will create a transform. Make sure we scale it from the centroids, so using this expression, or CEX, CZ, CY, and so on. So I'm gonna scale it, and I'm also going to move it down. Let's go to front view, and I'm gonna scale it, and also move it down. Something like this, I guess. Maybe scale it a bit more. Let's see, let me see how it looks on my end. So I guess that is fun, but I can move it a bit more down. So let's go in here now that I see it, this is too much. So what can we do? We can come into this curve, press F, select this point, press K, and move this a bit down. And everything should adjust because we have a procedural setup. So, oh, now we need to adjust this. No, that is fine. Why is it rotating it? Oh, it's not. I'm just seeing from a different view. So now let's move this a bit down. So something like this will work. And we can subdivide this. Maybe twice. And we could probably also bevel that edge in there. So let's do a bevel. And let's bevel just the flat edges. So, oops, it's not beveling. It is. So let's see. It's beveling. And let's do 2. And now we can subdivide and it will be sharp. So yeah, that's about it. We have our displacement working, hopefully. Yeah. And maybe we can also start to work on the displacement of this cap. So we have UVs, I guess. Yeah. So let's copy this, create a sub import in here, out cap. Let's rasterize setup. And we should have the island attribute. The UVs will overlap, but I don't mind. So I'm gonna do rasterize geometry. And I should have in here, if I set this to ID, I should have an island attribute. That's fine. Now I can do ID to mask. Oops, connected to ID. And let's change this to 1, 2. Yeah, that's fine. So now we want to create those ridges on the cap. So for that, I'm gonna create a ramp, and it can be mono. I'm gonna set this to horizontal, that's fine. Change this to flat and create a value in here. So this one in here and this one at 0.5. I'm going to change the number of cycles to, oops, to 20, and we need to repeat. So now we just need also to set the phase to 0.25, so it perfectly tiles, as you can see. Now I'm gonna transform this so I can repeat it easily instead of creating all the repetitions here on the ramp, which can be a bit problematic in some cases. So I'm gonna set to 0.15. I'm gonna blur it a bit, and this is kind of hard to look at. And I'm gonna blur it to 0.02, and then we can just multiply this over the cap mask. Oops, what am I doing in here? And we can also remap to set the range and create a null. And I'm going to say out cap disp. And I'm going to set also in here a displacement, so null, an output, I mean, out, oops, out bottle disp. I'm just doing this in a single cop network. You can totally divide it into different copnets. So I'm gonna get this cap geometry and do it like this, and we need to adjust the remap range. So let's say 0.01. That's too little. In this case, I choose 0.03. Why did I set it so low? Maybe I'm adjusting in here the displacement. No. So let me have a look in here. This should work. So let's increase this for some reason. So I'm multiplying this. Oh, I'm blurring this way too much, sorry. 0.02. I just want to blur it a little bit. Oh, this is hard to look at. So 0.003. And let's change this to gray. And we should have more or less this. It will look always bad in here on the preview, but on render it will look just fine. And you can always come in here and increase or decrease the repetitions. I'm gonna set it to 0.15. So we have our cap, we have our bottle, and that's about it. In the next part we will move this to Solaris and maybe do some extra work for creating the scene. And I also want to create a splash, so we will also do that. Let me just name this out Solaris. Oh, Solaris. And we will also create a splash in here on the bottom, so stay tuned for the next part. And as always, you can find all the files of my videos on Patreon alongside with exclusive courses and tools. So if you like the free stuff that I share on YouTube, please consider subscribing to my Patreon. And other than that, please let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this one, and I guess I'll see you next time. Thank you.